Hello everyone and welcome to National Space Academy Takeover Week. We are taking over the National Space Centre's social media channels and we are talking to some really exciting people in the space sector doing some fantastic things. I am Nat and I'm here from the National Space Academy, and I'm here today with Dr. Kierann Shah, also from the National Space Academy, who's going to talk to you a little bit about space skills for the space sector. Hello, how are you doing, Kierann?
Yeah, I'm really good. Thanks, Nat. It's nice to be here. We work together, so it's kind of weird to have you interviewing me, but thanks for doing it. I appreciate it.
Great, it's going to be fun. So I was wondering if you could start off with just telling us a little bit about yourself and all the many things that you know about working in the space sector.
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to share my screen, hopefully, now. Always a little bit of a risk, isn't it, when you do these things? Okay, hopefully you can hopefully see a slide that says inspire the next generation of space scientists, and it's got the National Space Academy logo. Great. So this is what my team do, what the National Space Academy does. We're part of the National Space Centre, which is based in Leicester. When lockdown ends and places like the National Space Centre can open again, I do recommend going for a visit, seeing lots of space artefacts, especially if you are interested in space. But inspiring is only a part of what we do. So if young people are inspired, they might want to find a way to work in the space sector, or what they could do next to do space science or engineering or another field. And the inspiration is just part of the way. That's just the beginning. And so what the National Space Academy does, and what my team tried to do, is we try to think about, well, where could you go with that inspiration? And how do you then find a way into a space career? So this next picture is what people think about when they think of space careers to start with. It's an astronaut. This is Peggy Whitson. She's a NASA astronaut, and this picture was taken in 2017 when she accrued the most cumulative time in space of any astronaut. And this is what people think. They think, okay, if I was going to work in space, I would literally work in space and be an astronaut. But there's only between 500 and 600 people who've ever been astronauts. Actually, that number is completely wrong. I've made that up out of my head. But there are very few compared to the number of people who work in the space sector. And when you look at this picture of Peggy, you can see she's wearing a spacesuit. She's surrounded by technology, and there's the Earth in the background. And it's not just the astronauts who create that technology, who come up with experiments and do work in space. And in fact, space is so much more than just space exploration. So I've created a little graphic here. It's a little bit of a PowerPoint graphic to show what I mean by space being more than space exploration. So you can see I've talked about robotic exploration. I've talked about human exploration there as well. So that's a picture of one of the Mars rovers. It's a Curiosity rover's selfie made of a composite of images. And Bruce McCandless using the Manned Maneuvering Unit, which is basically a space jetpack. And that's what a lot of us think about, and that's what gets a lot of us excited about space. But the exploration side, when we talk about the space sector and where businesses work in space, the exploration side is really a small fraction of what we use space for. I've also included astronomy and cosmology, so areas which researchers will work in, so people working in universities, working with telescopes, with space telescopes. That 96% of the universe missing, that's a reference to dark matter, which I'm not an expert on, so I'm not going to talk about that in great detail. And that's understanding our universe, the objects out there in space, stars, galaxies, other planets, and the origins of the universe, particularly with cosmology. And again, amazing, exciting. But when you're looking at where the jobs are in the space sector, you need to be a researcher, maybe working at a university to be doing those jobs. And so that's not where the growth in the sector is. When you look at the other elements I've put in there, space engineering, Earth observation, and then satellite applications, that's where the space sector's had real growth in the last, I'd say, 20 years. And that's where most of the jobs are. And a lot of the skills that people need for working in those areas are applicable across lots of these areas, and I'll mention a few. But how we use space for life on Earth is something I'm particularly interested in. And in the satellite applications image there, I've got satellite navigation and mobile phones, just to illustrate that the two kind of key applications are navigation and communication. But once you combine those two things, you can do all sorts of wonderful things. Earth observation is using the satellites around the Earth to look back at our planet, understand it as a system, and help us to make good decisions on how to manage our planet. And that's really important for environmental science, climate change, even down to the level of trying to track air pollution in cities and make life better for us actually in our houses and the streets we live on. And space engineering really ties into all of those areas. So the spacecraft that do things like space telescopes or robotic explorers, the technology that astronauts use, it's engineers who build those, and it's engineers who build the satellites that do the Earth observation and satellite applications as well. So engineering, hugely important for space. I do make a challenge when I work with young people to say that I feel I can connect any academic subject to space. So if anyone's watching and wants to challenge me, please do. I will happily give it a go. I've not yet been stumped. I'm waiting for the day when someone can stump me. So I'm going to talk, as I said, about space skills, and I want to answer questions about that. Oh, there you go. There's my mobile phones have just appeared in the corner. So I want to express a little bit why I think I can tell you about skills for the space sector. So my background is a science communicator. I studied physics at university. I did my PhD in nanotechnology. My nanotech knowledge is a bit rusty, but I will happily answer questions on nanotechnology if people want me to. Basically, it's the science of materials on the very small scale. So thousands of times smaller than a human hair width, really, really small. And physics gets a little bit strange on that scale because you don't have the properties of mass that we have on our scale or on the scale of things like planets and things like that. So here I've got some pictures of some of the kind of presentation work I've done working with young people. The bottom left there, I'm speaking at the Rutherford Appleton conference about education and skills. The middle picture is from a TED talk, no, a TEDx talk. I've yet to be invited to TED, waiting. And then in the bottom right, I was part of a panel talking about the film Hidden Figures and about women, and particularly women of color in science and STEM subjects. I have also had the pleasure of being able to meet a few astronauts and people working in the space sector. I've included the astronaut pictures because that's some of the people that will be most recognizable. So the first picture in the top left is my team and some of our colleagues and contacts with the amazing Kierann Shah, first British astronaut, went up to space in 1991. In the picture below, you can see I've got my snap with Tim Peake, the most recent British astronaut who went up with ESA, and the special coin that the National Space Academy were given by Tim for our work on education programs with him. More on that in a moment. The other two pictures I've got, so the one in the top right, I'm not in it, but our space engineering students from a couple of years back are in it. And they're there with Chris Hadfield, the Canadian astronaut who became famous for singing Space Oddity on the International Space Station. He came to the National Space Centre and spent some time with our students. And even though I'm not in that picture, I've included it because, yes, it's great for me to meet people and connect with people from the space sector, but what it's really about is making sure that our students get to have those connections. And I'm hoping that some of our space engineering post-16 students who are co-taught by us and Loughborough College will have some questions for me as we go through this Q&A. But we also, connect with students from other schools. We run careers events, things like that. And we also work with teachers. So the bottom right picture is the National Space Academy lead educators all together for our symposium, which we have once a year. And they're in front of a tree. And if I tell you that most of them are physics teachers and that this is a tree that's very important to physics teachers, I'm sure people can probably guess where we were and what that tree relates to. The only other clue I'll give you is it's an apple tree and it relates back to Tim Peake's mission Principia. So it all ties in together. So finding opportunities for teachers to get inspired and engaged around their subject, but then always connecting it back to space and always connecting the space topics to the curriculum. The main thing that I want is for when we're talking about space to young people to make it relevant to their lives when they're talking about what might affect them or their families or what they want to do in future. And my last slide I'm going to do is, it's a little bit of a brag for me, I guess. These are places that I've been able to travel to with the National Space Academy. And again, I'm showing you this to show you that I do do have a connection to the space sector. So the first picture is myself and one of our lead educators, Robin Mobbs, excellent physics teacher at Cité de l'Espace in France, in the Soyuz module that you can get into and imagine that you are an astronaut being launched to space in the Soyuz, as European, Russians and Americans are at the moment. And you can see how cramped it is, and we weren't allowed to wear our shoes in there, so you can see my socks. I've got a couple of pictures then next to that of delivery that we did overseas in China, working with international schools that were allowed us to then work with local schools a few years ago. And one of the things that we found in those pictures, you can see that's the trips to China, but in the bottom left, we had some work in the UAE. And one of the things about delivering overseas to young people is the science is the same. Physics doesn't care which country you're in. Neither does chemistry nor biology. You know, science is science, something so important to remember these days. And the enthusiasm that young people have for science, that is the same everywhere. It's a real universal, and something I've been really glad to see, really lucky to see, had the chance to present at other places overseas as well. And the last slide, I want to say the last one was the last slide, but this is the last one that I want to show you. With all the work that we've done at the National Space Academy, we've come up with 10 top tips for people who want a career in space. There's a poster that you can download from the National Space Academy website, which has all of these tips on there. And I'm just going to leave it up for a couple of seconds in case people want to have a look at it. A lot of these tips are applicable for other areas of work. So if you're interested in aerospace engineering or medicine and things like that, things like talking to people or applying for placements, reading up on things or taking part in competitions. If it's relevant to the area that you're interested in going into, then these all still apply. And this has come from talking to people who work in the space sector. So that is a whistle-stop tour of who I am, my background. I've been with the National Space Academy now for 9 years. And in a moment, I guess I'll give you my top advice on what skills people should be developing and what skills the sector is looking out for. And I'm quite happy, as the reason I'm here, to answer any questions.
That's great, thank you. So as you can see, everyone, Kieran's got a wealth of knowledge and experience on space and especially how you get into those careers. If you've got any questions, get them commented onto our post so we can get them answered for you. You mentioned about skills that you think are important for the space sector. We've had a few questions from our space engineers about that. So Matt and Vincenzo in particular, they want to know, what are the most desirable skills and what are the most important ones that you would consider for getting into the space sector?
Okay, that's a good question. It's a great place to start. I think I would split it into, there are good skills for workplaces generally, and then there are some that are specific to the space sector. So workplaces generally, you've got to work on things like your timekeeping, organization, these basics, especially if you're coming out of school or sixth form. If you're going into your first foray into the world of work, those are the basics that you've got to have covered. You know, people want people who can turn up to work on time, and people who can be organized and get their work done, people who can work well with other people. A lot of space is about teamwork. There are space missions which involve collaborations, people all around the world, lots of people working together, but at the same time being able to work independently. So being set your work and then being able to go off and do your work, come back with questions if you have them. And those are applicable to lots of different areas of work. However, if we look at the space sector specifically, I would say there are quite a few key skills. So I think studying STEM subjects is the most direct route into the space sector. There are some space sector jobs that don't need you to have a science background, but they're much, much fewer and far between. And what the STEM subjects give you is that background knowledge about science. If you wanted to do engineering, you would need a good background understanding of maths and of physics, which is the grounding for engineering. If you were going to be an Earth observation scientist, you might need to study geology, perhaps chemistry. And science subjects also give you an analytical way of thinking. So kind of thinking in the scientific way, a problem-solving mindset, which is really important. Problems come up all the time in space missions. You hear about space missions getting delayed, or things that happen when things go wrong. So developing a way of kind of thinking your way through a problem is very important, and a bit of resilience as well. So not giving up straight away when things go wrong, but going, okay, this didn't work. How do I change it? I'd say one of the most important practical skills that young people can be learning if they want to work in the space sector is coding, programming. Researchers, academic researchers, use huge data sets. So in astronomy, the amount of data that you would work through, say if you were researching stars or if you're looking at the early universe, it's just huge amounts of data. So you've got telescopes recording this data, and they're kind of sending it all down if they're space telescopes, or recording it all from Earth. And in order to go through that data, it's kind of more than one person can do, kind of sitting there going through a spreadsheet, kind of circling data. It's just far more data than you could do, than a human could go through. And so you need programming to be able to input that data into your program and then come out with something useful at the end. And that's also true with the satellite applications as well. So those satellites around the Earth, and there are thousands of them, are all recording and sending data all the time, and finding ways to go through all that data and find those insights that are useful often involves programming. I'd say if you're interested in astronomy or astrophysics research, probably you want to get to the point where you're coding in Python. But generally learning to code anyway from a younger age, I think, is important. I finished my degree in physics in 2004, and I didn't really learn coding. I only did a few bits of programming in Turbo Basic and Visual Basic, and any physicists who are working in research now watching this will be shaking their heads and saying, well, that's not enough programming, and maybe that's a contributing reason perhaps of why I'm not in research. I think presentation skills are important, and learning how to talk to people, to present your ideas either formally or in discussion, is another really important skill that you can start building on from a young age.
That's great, thank you so much. So we have some questions coming in the comments. We have one that is about a degree in English literature, but has since become really interested in space, and would love to pursue a career in the space industry. So what options do you think might be out there for Emma?
Hi, Emma. English literature, great topic. Well, my connection of literature to space is that there's this whole history of science fiction and of literary background relating to space. And of course, the first humans observing space, our ancestors, were all coming up with stories about the constellations. And that's a really interesting thing, that sometimes when we work with really young children, they're really interested in those stories. In terms of a career in space, I think if you are doing English literature, you're probably good with words, I would guess. And the space application, satellite application side is really made up of lots of private companies. It's the space sector isn't just down to government anymore. Not that it ever really was in the UK. Now government and industry work together in partnership. And so those companies need people to tell their stories. They need people who can do marketing, who can do their press releases. So you may be a space company and you've come up with this amazing satellite. It's going to do wonderful things, going to revolutionize satellite data. But if none of you are good at expressing that and explaining it, then it's not going to come across. So the most direct route, I think, from where you are now would be maybe to look at those kind of marketing roles in the space sector, look up space sector companies, have a look, see if you can find companies on LinkedIn, start following the UK Space Agency on its social media, because they often share news about space sector companies. The satellite applications Catapult as well. They have their own marketing people, but they also work with companies. So that's one really direct route for you. If you were to tell me that you wanted to be building spacecraft, then I would say you probably need to go back and start again in engineering. But if it comes to telling the stories of what people are doing in the space sector, I think that would be a really nice pathway for you.
Okay, we've had another question. So Ant has asked us what would be the best way to get involved in the space sector, and is there anything that would catch employers' eyes, anything that you could do to make yourself stand out?
That's a great question, and it leads me on to something where, I'm a bit more established in my career, but I do remember when I was earlier on in my career, there's this really frustrating thing that happens just when you're leaving education, which is that you look for jobs and they all say that they want experience. And you think, well, that's great, but how am I going to get that experience? How am I going to find enough experience for an employer to think, oh, this person knows what they're doing? And it is tough, and it is frustrating. And I think some employers are quite aware of that. And there are some companies that have a way of bringing on staff that accounts for the fact that you might not have many years of experience in the world of work. So some companies have graduate recruitment schemes. So if you have done a university degree, they would then recruit you as a graduate, train you up to work in their organization, and you would gain that experience on that scheme, and you would be paid to do that like a normal job. There is also the possibility of apprenticeship pathways. So for space, I think you'd be looking generally at post-18 apprenticeships. So you would need to have done A-levels or BTECs or something like that beforehand. And there aren't loads of apprenticeships out there for space. There are probably more for aerospace. But this week, on Thursday evening, we do have someone who is doing a space apprenticeship. Robson from Oxford Space Systems is going to come and talk to us on Thursday evening. So watch that if you're interested in what it's like to be an apprentice. You can look for work experience opportunities whilst you're studying. And there are various different organisations that offer work experience. Mullard Space Science Laboratory has just launched an online work experience for this summer. That's astronomy related. Lots of university departments and universities generally will have work experience. This year, again, it will probably mainly be online. So have a look at the universities that you're interested in, if university is the path you want to take. Lots of engineering companies have work experience programs. Airbus is a big aerospace company in the UK, but it has a space division. They're working on Mars rovers. So if you watch the National Space Centre Q&As, you might have seen the one with Abby Hattie, who is an engineer working on a Mars rover. And they do an online work experience. I think it's more general to Airbus, but some of it might relate to space. I'd also check out the Science and Technology Facilities Council, STFC. That's the Physics Research Council, but irritatingly, it doesn't have physics in the name, STFC. They have a number of laboratory sites in the UK, one down in Oxfordshire, one up in Daresbury, one in Edinburgh, and a few other smaller ones, and they offer some work experience. Those are all really competitive. And if you can't find work experience that exactly matches what you want to do, then don't despair. It will probably be really rare that you'll find, if you want to do astronomy, there aren't loads of astronomy work experience places. Most of them are aimed at year 12 as well. So if you're in a different, so that's ages 16 to 17, if you're in a different age, they might not have so many things out there for you. So just getting any work experience is good. When you are applying for jobs, being able to say that you've held down a job for a while is something that not everyone is able to say when you're leaving school or education, and finding other ways to get experience as well. So if you're an undergraduate at university, maybe there are some researchers there and you could help with their research. So go and ask and find out if there's things that they can offer you. If you're much younger, so if you're primary school age or early secondary, you'll probably find that people don't want to take you on for work because they're going to have to be responsible for your safety and things like that. It doesn't quite work the same way as it does for older students and for adults. But you can get involved with citizen science programs. So things like the Zooniverse, zooniverse.org, have a number of open research projects where the public can contribute to the research. So, I said about large data sets and how difficult it is for one person to go through. So they have some data sets that are loads of astronomical images, and they need people's help to sort through them because sometimes there are things that the human eye can see that computers can't. So they recruit people to get involved with that. So being able to say when you're applying to things, in my spare time, I read books on this topic, or I've got my own engineering project at home, or I've done some citizen science. That shows that you're serious about this topic, that you have done some work yourself to get engaged with this topic. So those are some of the things that I would suggest.
Oh, that's great. So there's some things that you can do perhaps while you're at school that would be really useful. So that leads on quite nicely to a question that we've had. So Barney would like to know what kind of first steps you would recommend after college for the space sector. And we've also had Ned in the comments asking what degrees would be best for going into a career in exploration or cosmology. So I thought maybe we could combine those.
Wow. Exploration or cosmology, right. And so start off with exploration. Generally, if you want to be an astronaut, You can find out what it takes to be an astronaut because the European Space Agency are about to open their applications for their next intake of astronauts. And the last one happened in 2009. They don't happen very often. You can see what a kind of gap that was. Tim Peake was one of the astronauts in at the last intake. So you can have a look at the European Space Agency's promotion of this opportunity. And I think most of our younger viewers, I think you will find that you probably don't yet have the qualifications, because they do ask for people to have degrees up to master's level in things like engineering or the physical sciences. Another route that you can go through is becoming a pilot and doing some technical qualifications as a pilot as well. So that gives you an idea. If you want to be the human explorer that goes into space, have a look at that ESA call and find out. And you may not be there yet. And in fact, most of the ESA astronauts, most astronauts these days are at least in their 30s, if not heading towards their mid 40s, because they've had such a long amount of career and training before they go into space. If you are interested in astronomy, cosmology, those research areas about looking out there, for astronomy or astrophysics or cosmology, I would say that you probably want to be looking at a physics degree, or possibly a maths or a computing degree. Astrophysics is heavy on maths and it's heavy on computing. That's really what astrophysicists are working with. There are some technician-y sides of things with some of the telescopes and the engineering maintenance of the telescopes, but those are much fewer and far between. But you could have a look at some telescope experiments and find out the kind of people that they have working there. Look up, if there's an area of research that you want to work in, you could look up researchers who work in that area, and they'll usually have some version of their CV posted online somewhere, or what they've studied before, so you can see what pathway they took. My recommendation for next steps out of college, there's two ways to do this. You can either look and say, that's the job I want to do. That person is doing the job I want to do. What did they do to get there? And try and find the most direct route. So if you want to be like Abby Hutty and work on Mars rovers as an engineer, you can look at what she studied. I can't remember what she studied, but it was probably something like materials engineering or electrical engineering, or something along those lines. So she's either working on the electronic components or the actual materials of the rover. She probably got at least an undergraduate degree. And so people who work in that area, that's the route that you want to take to get there. The other thing that you could do is think, well, what do you enjoy? And if you're doing A-levels at the moment, what do you enjoy? Because subjects get tougher as you get further along in them. We all know that from our experience of school. And when things get tough, if you're enjoying it, it just gives you that impetus to just keep going. And there are people who work in different parts of the space sector who've just followed their interests and seen where they ended up. Tim Peake, ESA astronaut, didn't always want to be an astronaut. He always wanted to fly cool things, which is why he became a helicopter pilot in the army. He just wanted to keep flying the next cool thing. So when the ESA call came out, he thought, well, that would be pretty cool to fly in space. And he followed that side of things. So rather than saying, whereas Chris Hadfield knew he wanted to be an astronaut and did as many things as he could to make that more likely. It's tough when you are that age to see how the things you care about could lead to a job, because you don't have that experience yet to see where it goes. So sometimes you have to take a little bit of a leap of faith and try and find good advice. And that's why our number one point on the top 10 tips is to talk to lots of people, ask questions. If there are people doing a job that you would like to do, if you can find a way to connect with them and ask them questions, that will really help you to make your decisions of what to do next.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Kierann Shah, for joining us here today. And thank you very much for all of the fantastic questions that we have had.
I hope some of it's been helpful. I know there's it's not easy when you're looking at that way when you're younger, but so many people I know don't have a straight line career. They followed a wiggly path, and that is completely valid as well. Good luck with it all.
It certainly seems to be a common theme to all the people that we're talking to this week. So just a reminder that we've got 15 Q&As happening in our Takeover week this week. So feel free to join us the rest of the week to see some of the more interesting people that we've got coming up as well. You can get in touch with National Space Academy on Twitter at UK Space Academy, or you can head to our website at nationalspaceacademy.org. Thank you very much for listening. and I will see you later on in the week.